There's an infinity of people joining the Napoleon Dynamite fan club.
Heck yes.
It's really in to be really out. Napoleon Dynamite.
Would you like some boondoggle keychains?
Already made like affinity of those at Scout Camp.
Rated PG. Starts Friday, June 11th.
Well, hello, all you friggin' idiots, and welcome to Cinemarcade. This is the podcast about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide. My name is Steve Gunley, and I have awesome podcasting skills. I don't know, what kind of skills do my co-hosts have?
Hi,
That's
I'm
where
Justin.
one of you can talk.
I fix computer, and I fix computer good, apparently.
There you go, computer skill.
Gosh, I'm J-Ban, and I can stab people with swords.
I mean, that is true, though.
It's true of most people. You can stab people with swords. I don't recommend it.
Well,
I
would
mean,
argue
J-Ban has training.
I've had training.
Oh, you've had training on that. Okay.
Yes, I've gotten gold medals. Like,
Oh, wow.
not like Olympic gold medals, but like regional gold medals.
A regional gold medal in stabbing people.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, which is not something I knew they gave gold medals for.
Yeah.
You have to try harder.
Hello, I am Woody Ciskowski, and I love technology.
We are so excited to have Woody back here.
Yeah.
Woody is here.
Whoa.
Well, I say back. This is the first time for you guys, but for those who have kind of just jumped in on this part of my podcasting journey, Woody and I podcasted together for 5 years on Ultra 64, Wii Universe, and all of our various Patreon content, which is still out there. People can still listen to that. You know, nothing's stopping
But
you.
you should listen to
I'm
all
the-
of these first.
Oh yeah,
I'm the Kip to Steve's Napoleon. I would say, because I'm the one who chats with babes online all day.
It's true. It's true. And yes, very true. We're so excited to have you. It's been far too long since we've podcasted. I mean, we've done some Video Game Apocalypse episodes, but it's
But
been a bit.
you threw yourself right back in to the podcasting cage fighting arena.
Yeah.
And I kind of took a step back every week, having to play another game of sometimes variable quality. I was like, I'm not
No.
quite ready for it yet. But
I don't know
more.
that these guys cannot relate to that.
Imagine watching a movie and then playing a game.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you show up and realize, I forgot to watch the movie. Oops.
Well, let's not talk about that like that's a universal experience here, Justin.
That was a one-off, Justin.
Some of us do the work.
Hopefully.
Some of us are like on the group chat doing the work. But we're very excited to have you, and we're very excited to be talking about Napoleon Dynamite. Yeah, lots of people are probably wondering what the hell kind of game can you make out of Napoleon Dynamite? Many of us are still wondering that.
Sure.
But it's going to be very interesting to get into. Napoleon Dynamite is something that is so very specific about what he was saying before we started recording, that it's one of those things that really kind of locks you in a very particular place in time, because it was
Just like Limp Bizkit.
just exactly like Limp Bizkit.
We were trying to get that out of the way earlier, Justin. You didn't need to bring it back in.
But now you put it in my mind.
Oh, okay.
But it's one of those things that was like a legitimate cultural phenomenon, but it was a very contained cultural phenomenon. They could have followed up on it in a million different ways, and nothing ever really materialized.
Well, that's why I'm actually really excited to talk about it, because I do wonder, this movie was big in our school, and I was in high school when this movie came out, and people were quoting it, but was it big in other people's experience? I don't know if just because I lived in a very small town, not unlike the one featured in Napoleon Dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
And I was I'm just wondering, did this movie land with other people? Was it quoted sort of, countrywide, or because I've also met people who are just I hate that movie. I don't care about that movie. I don't know why it was anything.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, what is
this
your guys' relationship to Napoleon and his movie?
Is this where I come in and say that I didn't like this movie, and at the time I was like, why? It's just, I don't know. I feel like it hit a little better now than it did then. But it's just like a style of comedy that I've never really enjoyed. And so at the time, everybody was quoting it, and I was just like, God.
Where did you grow up,
this movie.
Justin? If you don't like,
I grew up
country.
in a small town in northern Illinois.
Okay, so yeah, I'm from Western Washington, so it clearly had some reach.
Oh yeah.
I also grew up in small town Michigan, and I think that this definitely shows what it's like to grow up in a small town.
Yes.
When you talk about the zeitgeist or the reach that it had, it was definitely quoted endlessly. It was quoted for a long time to me obnoxiously before I ever watched the movie. And then I watched the movie, and when the first time I watched it, I was charmed by it. But on rewatching, I'm not sure the charm holds up.
That's fair.
You're describing the exact experience I have with Napoleon Dynamite every time I go back to this movie, where it's like it's hot and cold every single time. I really need to be in the right mood for it. This time around, I had to split my viewing, because I just had like a little narrow window of time. So I watched the first half of it, charmed the ever-loving hell out of me. Then I came back like 2 hours later, just after like a rehearsal or something, put on the rest of it, and I'm like, oh God, this is obnoxious.
Well,
it's the same movie.
I can see both readings.
I think that
I split my viewing as well. In the first half, so annoyed. The second half, so charmed.
Got a charm. See, exactly.
I feel similar to J-Band, but there is a tonal shift near like the middle. I say tonal shift. It's not like a major thing, but like the comedy.
It turns out they're
changes.
at a nightclub filled with vampires.
Yeah, like it starts off with a lot of like dumb family comedy, and then the second half of the movie is more about like people and less about making fun of each other.
I mean, I would argue the reason that this movie caught on so well, and also the reason that maybe we struggle with it a little bit, is that it is a movie of catchphrases. And I don't mean it's a movie like Anchorman that has a lot of catchphrases in it or a lot of quotable moments. It is a movie, and it is a script entirely compiled of catchphrases, of quotes, of one-liners. Like every single line in this movie could be pulled out and printed on a T-shirt. Sure. And you could like identify as the funniest line in the movie.
I would go further. It's not just a movie of catchphrases. It's a movie of memes. A brief
Memes.
moments that are like are just basically like set pieces that have become a cultural zeitgeist, images that have just are the equivalent of one-liners. Images that
I see the Kip, like congratulating himself at the bowling alley all the time to this day. But watching this movie, it started with Kip saying your mom goes to college. And from there, it was like a swarm of little mini PTSD memories of all of the jokes and one-liners that I remembered hating when I was younger, and then going, all right, look, I would absolutely say your mom goes to college.
So that's why you hated this movie, because it exposed to you. It's been said that we despise in other people the things that most remind us of ourselves, and so I think that's
very well be
the
my
source of.
It was definitely because I wasn't like that at the time.
But you're like that
now.
now.
I am. So I've grown into it, apparently.
Yeah, you're. Some people are going into their villain era. You're going into your Napoleon Dynamite era.
It
happened late for you.
It was somewhat recently around a podcast. I definitely wasn't during it, but I said like your mom to something to Steven, and Steve was just like, "You're that guy now." It's like, I don't know if I like it.
Sorry, that's you now. Let me give a little bit of background on this movie, because it had kind of a fascinating little journey. The movie Napoleon Dynamite was released June 11th, 2004. It's directed by Jared Hess and written by Jared and Jerusha Hess, married couple. It stars John Heder, John Grease, Aaron Rule, Efren Ramirez, Tina Majorino, Sandy Martin, and Diedrich Bader. And like we say, if you were around and conscious in the summer of 2004, there's a good chance you either owned or knew somebody who owned a Vote for Pedro t-shirt, right? I mean, are we all guilty of this?
Yeah.
I didn't have one, but I definitely had friends who had one.
You guys, can we take I bet this will make you feel old moment?
Yes.
You know how old Pedro is now?
How old is Pedro now? Roughly my age currently.
50.
Is he
Oh,
seriously?
Yeah.
He
Oh,
did
The actor who played
seem-
Pedro is 50 years old. He is
Wow.
apparently a DJ. So good on
Okay.
him.
Good for
Oh,
him.
nice.
That's awesome.
And he's delightful in this movie.
Yeah, I mean this movie is about to have its 20th anniversary, you know, and but yeah, this was a tiny little indie movie that really penetrated the zeitgeist for a little bit. It cost $400,000 to make. It made more than 47 million, which is actually a little smaller than I thought, given how
Sure.
ubiquitous this was. Like I would have thought this was 100 million grosser at least. But it really is an interesting little cultural nugget. This came about because director Jared Hess and star John Heder met while they were students at Brigham Young University in Utah. They collaborated on a short film about a nerdy teenage loner as part of a class project. And after the short started getting some attention on the festival circuit, a producer friend of Hess's convinced him to drop out of college and pursue filmmaking full time. So they were able to shop the script around. It was purchased by 20th Century Fox's new indie sublabel, Fox Searchlight, and it started getting some buzz. Now, the studio really wanted to put Jake Gyllenhaal in the lead of this movie.
Wow.
Would have been a weird choice. I mean, this was post Bubble Boy, so like he can do a movie like this, but he's probably shooting Brokeback Mountain around this time.
That would be a very funny 1-2 punch in the filmography as Napoleon Dynamite into Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah, right. Oh, when did Jarhead? Jarhead was like 2004 or 5, right?
Yeah, I
Something
think
around
so.
there.
I would
mean,
love. I
He
would
got
love
ridiculously jacked for that movie.
Sure.
He is like wildly muscular. I cannot imagine a wildly muscular Napoleon Dynamite.
I mean, I can't. The thing is, I can't imagine anything different Napoleon Dynamite. Like,
No.
I would love to see Jake Gyllenhaal or anyone else in the role. Not because I don't think John Heder does a phenomenal job, but just because, like, is there any other actor? I mean, who's been like so defined by like one role? Because John Heder is still like in a lot of movies and still works, but like is not had any sort of like A-list success. What he's probably
Yeah.
C or D tier. And
he had like a little movie star run for a bit after this. Like he had like, you know, a couple of movies that didn't
Glory.
land. He did like School for Scoundrels and The Benchwarmers, and then Blades of Glory, or is that the one, Blades of Glory with Will
Yeah.
Ferrell?
Yeah.
I always confuse that with the
Balls of
hockey
Fury.
game. Yeah, we talked about Balls of Fury. Yeah, that was kind of a hit movie, you know, and he was
Okay.
the second lead in that film, you know, so like he had a little run for a little bit, but none of his roles ever quite connect, and I think it's because he can't ever fully get out of the shadow of this character because he played it too perfectly.
right, because this character is just like, you know, whether you like this movie or not, like this character is one of these amazing things that can like fully exist. Like you can see still pictures of this movie of Napoleon sitting there, and you're like, wow, that is an interesting looking character. Like I
Yeah.
want to hear what this guy has to say. Just like so much of this movie is characters kind of sitting or standing and looking at stuff.
Yeah.
Just like the way that they're able to capture that is so good. Like to me, this movie is kind of a duo with another one of my favorite movies, which is Ghost World,
Yeah.
in terms of like this sort of comedy that is kind of sad all the time, which is sometimes in my darker hours how I feel, where you like kind of look at things and you're like, well, that's kind of funny, but it's also kind of sad. And like
Yeah.
that's just sort of the vibe of this. Like About Schmidt is another one of those movies that I really, really like.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just feel like John Heder's, the way he holds his body and the voice is just so phenomenal.
Well, there's something observational about Napoleon too, because he is obviously very heightened, but like we all knew this guy, right? Am I
Yeah.
alone? Like, did we know this
we all
guy in
knew
high
this
school?
guy. Yeah.
Like
Some
there
of
was
us
always-
were that guy.
I
Yeah, if
didn't-
you didn't know that guy, it's because you were that guy. Yeah.
I didn't know that guy, and it's because I didn't know anyone. I was
But,
the
like-
quiet kid in the corner.
Oh, so you were that guy.
Yeah.
you were
Maybe.
you had a pocket full of tater tots. Yeah.
No,
most
but
given
like I
time.
wish, because tater tots are great.
No, but I mean, there was always that. It's the very specific observation that like this kid is a loner not just because he's weird, but because he's unpleasantly weird. Like he's aggressive. He's not only very assured about himself and who he is condescending to everybody who doesn't have it as figured out as him. Like he's a pretty unlikable person. And I think that's part of the brilliance of the John Heder in this role, is that like you don't want to stop looking at this guy because
Right.
he is kind of a jerk.
He is kind of a jerk, but like I think that's another thing that I like about this movie a lot, and I think it comes from probably John Heder and Jared Hess's aesthetic as Mormons, and maybe this is me like putting something on it that's not there, but like I don't feel like this movie is ever that mean-spirited, and like for being like a teen movie, like this movie is hardly ever horny except for the weird subplot with LaFonda, which I'm not crazy about. But like it always feels like very clean to me in a way that is uncommon and kind of reminds me of like Homestar Runner or something like that. Where some of the criticisms that I've heard of this movie is that it's very sort of judgy and mean towards like its characters and small town America as like a bunch of rubes. But I don't feel like this movie is mean to its characters.
No, like even the kids at school, I mean, there's like one kid that bullies Napoleon, but like, you know, mostly people just kind of stay away. Like,
but I don't feel like the movie itself is like casting judgment of us like, oh, look at these weirdos. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. And
Definitely casting, like, it's like that they definitely have a look at the weirdos vibe, especially in the first half. I think it changes in the second half where Napoleon starts to get friends and starts to step out of his shell and learns to dance. But I definitely like the first half, which is I think is a little bit more unpleasant for me, is like this like rural middle of nowhere, not going anywhere, not doing anything vibe.
But the thing that's odd about it is like I watched this with the commentary because I've seen this movie so many times. I'm like, okay, I'll try it with the commentary. And like almost all of the events that occurred in this movie are from like Jared Hess's life, who grew up like on the border of Utah and Idaho, in one of, I think in this town, maybe.
It might be. I know most of the cast, like the extras in this movie, are just like his friends from childhood.
Right, exactly. And so many things, like he talked about how his wife was at a dance and had made herself a dress, and the boy that she was with complimented her sleeves as being real big. And so he just put that in the movie, and like him riding a bike, towing his brother behind him was another thing just sort of from the movie. And so it is an odd thing because I feel like probably more than anything else, like this movie's aesthetic is based on like small town rural America that could be looking down at a little bit, but like the only way that this movie got made is with the support of the town that like is being featured. And like I'm sure that they are all really proud and happy to be like, I bet if you go to that town, they're like home of Napoleon Dynamite or something like that.
I'm sure.
Preston, Idaho, I think it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think this movie captures, like we mentioned, all of us grew up in small towns of some form or another. And I think this movie really captures the boredom of small town America and about how you really need to make your own fun and commit to your own aesthetic. And yeah, exactly. The thing of like dragging your brother into town, like it wasn't on rollerblades, but like me and my siblings would string our bikes together. We would make ramps. We would, you make your own fun.
Take them off sweet jumps, to use the terminology.
You go off the sweetest jumps. You get like 3 feet of air every time.
I was lucky enough to, when I was those ages, have access to RuneScape.
Oh, see, there you go.
I stayed inside and played RuneScape.
Well, and that's another weird thing about this movie. Sorry, J-Band, were you going?
I was just like, I think this captures a really specific time before much internet.
Yes.
You saw the computer that Kip was using. This was a time before, we had Xboxes and
they probably used AOL.
Well, Yeah, because like this movie obviously came out in 2004, but I think is very much based on Jared Hess's upbringing, which would have been in the early 90s, probably would have been around when this is taking place. So like Kip has access to the internet, but like it barely works. Yeah, it's just like this chat
But
room.
it's also, this is a town that's like, this probably is 2004, but it feels like a few steps behind, like where everyone else is. And Napoleon's house is a few steps behind that, you know.
Wood paneling. But yeah, like
exactly.
I really feel like the musical soundtrack is straight out of the late 80s, actually.
Yeah. It's got a little bit of like a twee kind of Fox Searchlighty kind of sound. I just associate it with like a Little Miss Sunshine in this. I don't know, it's just kind of a little. But they do have that great White Stripes song in the beginning too. And kind of the opening credits are kind of my favorite part.
The opening credits are amazing. Well, I learned too in the commentary is that the opening credits were not initially part of the movie because it was very low budget. And then when Fox decided to buy the movie at Sundance, they gave them more money to put in those opening credits, which is why they have, very nice production values in that opening.
Right.
And then they were able to reach out to the White Stripes, which I think was the first time that the White Stripes, they messaged the White Stripes directly and were like, hey, here's our movie. Can you possibly give us some music to use for this intro? And it is really good.
Yeah. I read that there's a post-credit scene of this movie that takes place at Kip's wedding to LaFonda, and Napoleon rides in on horseback. And that scene alone cost about twice what the whole rest of the movie did. And that was just like Fox's insistence. Yeah.
It's just this weird budget bloat, because like this is a low budget movie, but I don't feel like it ever looks cheap in the sense that like it feels like the aesthetic is very intentional. And I was wondering, like, this, do you guys think this is like the lowest budget movie that you've covered on this podcast so far? Because usually, like,
no, because we covered Blair Witch Project.
Oh yeah, Blair Witch
Project. Okay. So that has that one beat, but this is definitely a contender for that for sure.
I'm reading a little bit about how that credit scene came into play, and it was like when they were shopping the idea, like when they were doing the idea and like showing it to them, they were like, the Fox folks were like, oh yeah, this is fun. And then somebody was like, there's a hangnail on the hand. Let's fix that. So one of the first interactions they apparently had with the studio was, other than like once they got everything going, was, oh yeah, they're flying a hand model out to help reshoot the opening credits.
Oh my God.
So they didn't like John Heater's hands.
Yeah, they ended up using a combination of the hand model, John Heater's hands, and like one or two of the producers for the final shots, or for the.
Well, I mean, his knuckles are chapped from playing tetherball with all of his heart. The tetherball just really brought me back in particular this time. Like that was it. There was just a small but very real period of my life that revolved around tetherball, and that was
revolved around tetherball. Well done.
I always wanted to play tetherball, but I didn't have any friends, and I felt weird hitting it.
That didn't stop Napoleon.
Myself. It didn't stop Napoleon. It did stop me.
No, that's where you could practice all your kicks and your jump flips and everything like that. Yeah. I mean,
that's true.
This is a movie that doesn't have a plot or like stakes of any, like not a traditional plot.
If there's any stakes, it's Pedro running for president, which doesn't get revealed until like an hour into the movie. That doesn't even start.
And even then, those are pretty low stakes, like if he doesn't get to be president of this small town, Idaho, high school, it's really not that big a deal.
Right.
But, and it's also, it's not a movie where a character experiences a lot of growth. Like Napoleon kind of learns to admit that he maybe likes this one girl a little bit, but not really. It's more that like, he softens slightly enough to make friends.
Right.
But he's always been pretty comfortable with who he is and where he is in the world. And like that, he doesn't seem interested in wanting to change that. And that's just kind of part of his whole like aggressive loser idea here, just like you can't really feel like the movie's picking on him too much, because he is picking on himself more than anybody else. Like he is the source of his own problems.
Sure. And I do feel like the end of this movie and sort of the climax of his dance scene is pretty satisfying. This movie does the thing where a lot of movies struggle with, like, the idea of if you have someone on stage in front of an audience in a movie and they put on some kind of performance, there's the way the audience reacts and then the way that we as viewers react. Because sometimes, like, there'll be a movie about a stand-up comedian who does like this terrible comedy in the movie and everyone's laughing and you're like, wait, but that's not funny. Is the bit that it's supposed to not be funny? And you get confused. And like here, I feel it lines up perfectly because like John Heder does this amazing dance and you're kind of like all taken aback being like, was that good? Was that weird? It seemed good. And then like the audience in the movie kind of responds the same way.
Yeah. And it's kind of set up like this triumphant moment, but like they queued that up maybe 10 minutes before they paid it off. He finds the tape in the Goodwill. We see 2 scenes of him practicing and then he's on stage doing it, so this isn't something that's been teased out throughout the entire movie. It is just kind of like dropped in towards the end. So yeah, not really any kind of traditional narrative. I think that's another thing I struggled with when I was younger. There's always the idea that like if you don't like a movie because it's doing something that they're not aware that they're doing it, and it's not until you need to step back and be like, okay, that was a choice. Like they're choosing to not have a narrative. They're choosing, this is all intentional.
Well, and also it's just everything stems from budget in some ways. Like the cheapest thing is to just kind of have your characters standing around looking at stuff and talking.
Yeah.
Like conflict often leads to having more intricate set pieces or having to pay like your higher paid actors like John Grease or, Diedrich Bader more money. So
yeah, you have to imagine that's pretty flattering for John Grease at this point in his career to think, yes, I'm the biggest name on this call sheet. Like,
Steve, have you ever seen the movie Joysticks?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Oh my god,
that's a highlight of the John Grease filmography where he plays King Vidiot.
I've had a little run of John Grease movies recently for some reason, just kind of randomly coming up. We talked about Terror Vision on my other podcast where he's a heavy metal guy named OD. But then I was just thinking, like, this guy's crazy versatile because he's that same year he's in Real Genius, where he's like the weirdo living in the closet. And then like he's Uncle Rico, and now he's on the White Lotus. It's just like that guy's got a really crazy
that's a pretty. You could have I've been thinking about that occasionally, like to have film festivals with different actors. Yeah, and like you could do a fun John Grease one. You call it Grease Fest.
Absolutely, yeah. It could take place in
have
Greece.
Some real sloppy burgers for sale as well.
And everyone would be very
summer
confused.
nights. Yeah,
they would come and you're like, "Oh, sell tickets to Grease Fest," and then we're all gonna watch Joysticks and Napoleon Dynamite.
There's just a bunch of people dressed like pink ladies who don't know where to go. Yeah, but I mean, like I said, it's a movie that because it's so piecemeal in its ways that like you do kind of respond to it differently every time. And I think this was a movie definitely in 2004. This movie got overexposed in a pretty severe way. I think once like the Vote for Pedro shirt started like being sold in my local Walmart, like it was just kind of all over. And then everybody was quoting the lines back and forth. And it was just always like, there was always the one kid who kind of made his whole personality just saying, gosh, like Napoleon, like as often as possible. And it did start to grate.
Man, like a couple years ago, I got like this weird pang of nostalgia for like people quoting Borat. Like I was like, all this stuff I totally agree was like super annoying, but I'm like, man, I would love to hear like a my wife or like, just someone quoting Dr. Evil or something like that. Cause it feels, and maybe it's cause I'm out of high school or whatever, but it feels like that time is gone of like the shared bad movie quoting that just kind of permeates. And like, I would love another obnoxious Mike Myers character to quote or something.
Yeah, I was saying, what was the last like big crossover movie that everybody was just sort of like quoting at each other?
I almost feel like it was Borat, and that movie's from like 2006 or 2008.
Yeah. I'm sure there's something more current, but like there's no real monoculture anymore, It's just like movies are getting buried on Netflix, so like not everybody knows.
It seems like if any movie was going to do it, it would have been Barbie. Mm-hmm. Like, because I imagine, I feel like Ken has a lot of those kind of lines. But I again, maybe it's because I'm not in high school, but I don't even feel like Barbie managed to make it.
Yeah, I guess what is the? I guess I've seen a lot of the sweaters that say like "I am Knuff," but he doesn't really
Oh,
say
sure.
that in the movie. He just
I think
wears
he
the
does at one
sweater.
point.
He does. He does it once.
Oh, does he say it? Okay, yeah. And I guess I was hearing the "My job is beach" line for a bit over the summer, but it seems to have died down.
Well, yeah. No,
But,
that's
you
all
know,
right. Good job.
one or
Barbie.
two. We'll say Barbie. We'll say it's
All
Barbie.
right.
But it's a hard one. But Barbie was a weird phenomenon in a lot of different ways. But this one also was just one that kind of hit really hard and then went away. There was obviously talk of doing a sequel. Because why not strike with the iron's hot? But Jared Hess didn't want to do it, and John Heder didn't want to do it without Jared Hess. And you can't really do this movie without at least one of those guys. You just can't really follow it up. Apparently, they've been noodling with the idea of doing like a real time, like 20 years later kind of sequel that would just sort of catch up with them in their lives. I don't know that I want to see that. I don't know.
It's there was actually an animated series based on this that came out. I want to say like significantly later.
It was 2012. Yeah, it was 2012 that came out, and the whole cast came back.
I was legitimately excited for that because I'm a man with no taste, and it is not a good show.
Is it not good? I never got to it. Did either?
I mean, I think it lasted one season and got canceled, but it's I mean, again, like why? All of these physical performances and like the look of these characters is such a highlight of it that to like have it just look like an episode of Family Guy or whatever does not look good. Yeah, it needs that kind of like low rent sort of Wes Anderson kind of aesthetic that they stumble upon. That's what this reminded me of. Weirdly, it reminded me of like very early Wes Anderson. No, and I'm totally with you, and I want to just briefly talk about that because I think it's interesting. Like I think about Jared Hess kind of more than I should because like he had a very similar like starting thing as Wes Anderson. Like he made this quirky short film with like one of his friends, which is basically how Bottle Rocket got started. It was like a short film with the Wilson brothers, and like Owen Wilson and Wes Anderson went on to like have two, mammoth careers, and like Jared Hess and John Heder sort of like had a similar vibe and just couldn't quite break out of whatever it was they did. And not to say that like Jared Hess hasn't done more stuff. Like I kind of like the movie Masterminds, but
I haven't seen it. That was kind of a COVID casualty, right? Like I think it came out before that. There was some kind of bungling, like I think the studio shut down or something.
Maybe so, but I think that it's a fun, stupid crime caper movie. But like he never quite found success.
Well, that's the crazy thing. Okay, so he had a couple of movies after this. One of them was
I know where you're going with this.
Nacho Libre, which was a modest hit. I've heard people defend it. I've never seen it. They had a couple of indie movies called Gentlemen Broncos and Don Verdine, which
those are awful movies.
Pretty bad.
Like you watch them, they are aggressively terrible.
Yeah, that was. I didn't see Don Verdine, but I saw Gentlemen Broncos.
And they have they both have like great cast. Like any movie with Sam Rockwell and Jermaine Clement, you're like, this is going to be fun. And it is not fun. Yeah. Did either of you see that? Did you see Gentlemen Broncos? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty terrible. But then Masterminds kind of came out. But then just recently, Jared Hess took on a very ambitious new project. He's going to be the director of the Minecraft movie. All right. He's like the 10th director to take this on. But apparently this one is actually happening. Like they have a cast, like they're shooting it. I don't know what it's going to be or what it's going to look like, but that's kind of a weird swerve for this guy's career. Like, did they get Chris Pratt to play Minecraft Steve? No. Jack Black, luckily. Yeah, I think it's Jason Momoa is the lead of the movie. Oh, really? It's really weird to think of because like that guy seems very round to me. Like he doesn't seem square. He doesn't seem like. I know Jack Black is in it, and I forget who somebody else was just announced too. So I think after Jack Black is Steve, Jason Momoa is second on the cast list according to Wikipedia. Okay. Wow. I think after the Mario Brothers movie, there is now a legal obligation that you have to put Jack Black in all of your video game movies. Kinda, yeah. Just it's like you're sort of Black is pretty great. I'm not down on Jack Black. I'm just saying like that's the Five Nights at Freddy's. If it had Jack Black in it, would have done double its numbers. Yeah, and I know it was very successful.
It was very successful.
Yeah, I know. Imagine if it had Jack Black in it.
I mean, we haven't talked about this yet, Woody, but if I could do a quick side tangent, seeing that new Super Mario Brothers movie has made me come a complete 180 on the original 1993 Mario Brothers movie. You were always right about that movie. I have to give it to you. You were always right
Wow.
about that movie.
This is coming out big news now.
This
Yeah,
is
I
big
had
news.
always been a loud, irritating defender of the Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo Mario movie, and Steve begrudgingly watched it with me, perhaps multiple times.
At
We
least
podcasted
twice,
about
yeah.
it, and he still came down on it. But yes, I was only cemented on my opinion with the soulless 2023 Mario movie, which is just.
It's a movie that gives you exactly what you think you want, and it is utterly empty and pointless and joyless. And I would rather have weird post-apocalyptic mushroom fungus Dennis Hopper any day.
All right.
So
Good.
that's where I've come down on the Super Mario Brothers movie. But
Well, we can close up our relationship now. It's come full circle. I've convinced you of the Mario Brothers movie.
that's all you ever wanted.
Yeah.
Yes, just to turn me around on that.
The Minecraft movie is going to be live action.
What it is?
What?
Is everyone going to wear like cardboard boxes or something? Well, that's dumb.
I mean, that actually sounds pretty good and something that Jared Hess would be very good at directing.
And I think Jack Black
yeah.
could rock it. Jason Momoa is, I mean, he seems like a chill dude. I don't know.
But he's you're right. He's circles. Jason Momoa is circles, and Jack Black is a square.
Give him a refrigerator box.
I mean, I will say that Jason Momoa is about to cross the Chris Pratt threshold of everyone being sick of him and thinking that they were really into him and then realizing, I've had enough of this guy. Don't come after me, Jason Momoa. If you listen to this podcast, I got nothing.
And he does.
Oh no.
Yeah. But no, that's definitely been a thing. I've noticed that like we're in like a post movie star kind of environment. And like anytime we have somebody who seems like they might have crossover appeal, like, oh, this person's name could sell a movie, even if they're not playing a superhero, we kind of beat that to death. Like we give them, they need a podcast and they need like 6 different streaming shows and they need to host a game show and they're in commercials. And then
there's just a random show where like Jason Momoa travels across the country talking to people. And you're like, why is Jason Momoa my travel guide? That's just odd.
Look.
Upon further inspection, it's Jason Momoa, Jack Black, and Jennifer Coolidge.
Jennifer Coolidge was the third one announced. That's right.
Well,
I was trying to remember.
As 3 other actors and actresses that I do not know of. They appear to be in the kiddo variety.
Oh, okay.
Well, this sounds weird, and I will be very intrigued if it actually comes out with that cast under Jared Hess's direction. It seems like it could be a weird thing.
Do you think it'll be better than Napoleon Dynamite?
No.
Maybe.
But again, I like Napoleon Dynamite a lot, so.
Yeah, okay. So where do we, I mean, having discussed it, I mean, again, this is a movie, the temperature changes every time you like look at it differently, but like, I don't know, where are we coming down on this movie before we talk about the game? Like, I think I've landed on like, I'm very charmed by this movie, but it needs to be a small doses kind of thing. I'm glad this is just what it is, because I think if there were a successful sequel or if there were a franchise built around this, it would have gotten to be too much too quickly. I think now with like 20 years of this being the only like significant Napoleon Dynamite property, I can come down on it as being a pretty charming, fun movie, but it's still kind of a small doses thing, I think.
Sure. I like this movie. I always find it enjoyable. I feel like it has this weird thing of somehow feeling both like a personal movie to me, like, oh man, have you guys seen Napoleon Dynamite? Like,
right.
Like, of course they have, because like everyone our age has sort of seen it, but like it somehow felt like it spoke to me on a very personal level, even though like it was this very successful thing.
Yeah.
And I just feel like there's nothing really that quite looks like it. Like I think Kip is like, obviously Napoleon is the star, but like I think Kip is like super delightful, and tons of the lines and interactions that him and Napoleon have are really funny. And like, I don't know, I guess I kind of just feel like there's not a lot of movies that are like this. And whenever you get a movie that is like very distinct and weird, and unique, I always come in favor of it because like the alternative is that it's the Mario movie from 2023.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of an uninteresting thing. And so I appreciate that this movie exists. So I say good movie.
That's a fair. See, yeah, I appreciate that argument. J-Ban, where do you come down on this one?
I've seen this movie twice in 20 years, and I think that's about enough.
There you go. All right.
I think I like when people are weird and doing weird things, and so that the weirdness pleases me. The cringe comedy, it's just like it's not my thing. The aesthetic I like because I'm a big Wes Anderson film, so I actually quite like the aesthetic of the film.
Yeah.
Wait, did you say
like
that you are a big Wes Anderson film?
Yeah, we're announcing it here. Wes Anderson's new project, J-Ban the movie. So
I would watch it.
Sorry to interrupt.
I do own a beret. Contact me, Wes Anderson.
I'm just pitching the idea. Now I want you to be like a traveling like fencer or something, you know.
I
And,
was in an improv troupe called Yes Anderson, and it was fantastic.
that sounds pretty good.
It was really fun. But yeah, I think it's got its strengths, it's got its weaknesses, and I think the weaknesses is the flashing me back to living in small town America. And maybe if you don't live in small town America, you can find it to be hilarious. But I can just be like, oh my God, I hated living in a small town so much.
It does kind of strike that ugly chord. Yeah. Yeah. It's just the image of like a walk-in free or like a big standing freezer full of meat that's just always out in the garage. I don't know why. I just associate that very much with living in a very small town, Colorado.
We were lucky enough to have a freezer in the garage.
Yeah.
Like a stand-up freezer.
Okay.
That felt pretty chill.
Although I do hope to have a garage again one day, just because I want to do that like middle-aged guy thing of having a extra fridge in the garage just for beers.
Oh, when we were moving into the house that we're renting, when I was doing the tour, the owner was like, yeah, I'm going to take this fridge out of here before you guys move in, so don't worry about it. It was there the day we moved in, and he's like, yeah, if it breaks, I'm not going to fix it, but I don't want to move it. So
yeah,
y'all get a garage fridge, and it's got like some frozen pizzas and beer.
Fair enough. There you go. That's all you need. All right. Well, let's transition to this game here, because this is a deeply strange game that a lot of people are probably not aware of its existence. So Napoleon Dynamite.
I was not aware of its existence.
Oh, you weren't. See, I assumed you were picking this episode because you knew how weird ass this game was and you had a take on it.
No, my take was I want to talk about Napoleon Dynamite because I was just looking through a list of like, video games based on movies, and you guys had already done Wayne's World. And because I find that the most fascinating is like, what are the movies that like seem totally untranslatable to games? And then I learned that this game actually exists, and I'm like, yeah, I would play that. I'm hungry for more Napoleon content.
Well, boy, oh boy, are you getting more?
Was your hunger
here.
sated?
Yeah.
Your cup runneth over now.
What was it stated, or did you just not want more?
Well, let's find out. Napoleon Dynamite, the game, came out on October 30th, 2007. It's developed by 7 Studios and published by our buddies at Crave Entertainment. And this was released on the DS and the PSP. We played the PSP version for this one, which I think is probably the better way to go. But this hit the PSP 3 years after the movie with basically no fanfare. This is a Crave production, like we mentioned. We last talked about them for the GBA adaptation of Elf, which turns out not very good.
I believe
that game.
Wild.
Kind of an uninspired, boring platformer game. I will say this game is at least putting in more effort than that Elf game did. Like, if that Elf game is like the least possible amount of effort you need to turn a game into a movie into a game, this is not that. There's a lot of effort.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, this is a couple clicks over that in terms of effort, but in terms of like gameplay design,
no,
I feel like most of this is about if you probably taught me if you spent 4 hours with me teaching me how to program,
Yeah,
I could probably program most of this game.
probably.
Maybe, but if you did, you'd be doing a fantastic job because I think this game is thoroughly great.
Oh wow! Okay,
J-Ban
okay.
likes mini games.
I
That
do
is
like
true.
mini
Yeah,
games.
you do.
I don't. This shouldn't be a shock for us, because the game is just mini games.
Yeah, this is there are if you're playing the PSP version, there's 30 mini games. There's only 25 on the DS, so we get 5 extra mini games.
No, I think 30 is generous in the sense that they reuse the dancing one multiple times, and there's like a Kip singing one that is essentially the same game.
Yeah, it's kind of like those old Nintendo cartridges that promised to have like 52 or 56 different games on it, but really it was like 4 of them are like Pong.
Right,
You know,
and then
like,
they
only this one's
palette
red.
swap. They palette
Yeah.
swap Bill and Lance in like the Contra clones.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's not that different, but I will shout out the visual style of this, which is immediately the most striking and kind of interesting thing about this game is it's a paper collage. Like this is a movie that it looks like it's kind of cut and paste together from screenshots of the movie. And I have to say, this is kind of a novel approach. Like instead of just sort of rendering like kind of shitty looking pixels of these characters like doing their thing, they took a stand with it and they did something interesting. And I think it's something that's in keeping with the style of the movie. Like, so I'm going to give it credit for doing that. I think that was ultimately kind of cool, even if it did often to me look like a jib jab. You know,
Sure.
just look like a Napoleon Dynamite version of the e-cards you would send to your parents.
Yeah.
I was almost surprised that this game came out in 2007 because it feels very like like they really wanted to pump it out quick and as early as the internet as it could be after the movie. Because the jib jab comparison is very apt, and like the actual gameplay designs feel very much like something you would play on a web browser. Not that that's bad. Because J-Ban, I'm actually with you. Like I kind of like this game too. Even though, I played through this whole game, and I played through all the mini games, and this game gets my recommendation in the sense that it never really gave me a reason to stop playing it, even though I don't think anything about it was particularly fun, but all of the mini games were fairly short, and then they would just give me 6 new mini games, and I'm like, sure, I'll try out these 6, and I beat them all pretty much on my first try, except for a couple, and then I would just play the next one. I got a little bogged down on the bowling one.
Okay, I don't think we got that far. For me, I got bogged down on the time machine circuit board puzzle.
That one was one of the ones I had to play a couple times, but I felt like that one was slightly better designed than some of the other ones.
Yeah. Now, I read there were very few reviews of this game that came out at the time, but I read one that made actually a really compelling point. A lot of what we talk about on this show is like, why does this movie need to have a game? Does it complement? Does it understand like the vibe of the movie or the property it's adapting? Now, and while I will say it adapts the visual style in a way that I think is interesting and unique without being one-to-one, it does kind of negate the principle of the movie. All right, because and this reviewer said it better than I did, but basically Napoleon is funny as a character in the film because he is somebody who brags about having a lot of elite skills that he just doesn't have.
Right.
The game kind of requires you to have those elite skills. Like you need to be able to throw a football over a mountain in this game as part of a mini game, which is something Napoleon can't do. And like that's the point of the character is that he can't do these things.
Maybe this entire game takes place in Napoleon's brain.
Now I was having that kind of thought as well, like so that could be. I mean, that might be meeting it more than halfway.
I think there are definitely some mini games that imply that because they really start stretching for mini games as it goes on. Like near the beginning of the movie, when Napoleon goes and does a presentation, he talks about how they're like dropping bombs on the Loch Ness Monster or something.
Yeah.
That's one of the mini games later where you play as Napoleon underwater and you use wizard skills to destroy battleships that are trying to drop bombs into the lake, the Loch Ness, which is, one throwaway line in the movie, and another one you hunt wolverines in Alaska in a very much knockoff of the Oregon Trail hunting mini game.
Okay, guys,
that's
we're gonna
great.
play
A
this.
slightly less polished version of the Oregon Trail hunting game.
All right, guys,
but-
we're gonna play through this a little bit further than we did because some of these sound amazing. But
I mean, you're going to be disappointed for what it's worth. But yeah, I guess I think that the mini game collection was a pretty smart way to do this. If you have to make a game based on this, because like we were saying earlier, the movie's pretty ramshackle and is sort of a random collection of scenes. Like I forgot that there was even a bowling scene in the movie when I played the game, and I'm like, oh, what is this? And then on rewatching, I'm like, yo, there is a bowling scene. It's about 2 minutes long.
yeah,
And the only takeaway from it is Kip going, yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. It's just they had a bowling alley that was available for them to use, and they needed to film somewhere.
They needed to pad the time on the movie a little bit.
Yeah, and this game has like annoying voice clips, but it does the terrible thing where like most of it is not voiced. It's just the only things that are voiced are like John Heater saying "gosh" or
Yeah,
"I did it."
sweet.
Like
Yeah.
and so that wears you down. I don't know. It was like the whole thing to play through all the mini games, I think took me less than 2 hours. And I didn't feel any. There is a multiplayer component here. You guys didn't happen to have 2 PSPs laying around, did you?
No,
No,
it's-
sadly, shockingly, no.
Yeah, I'd be a weird person to go over to their house and be like, let's play Napoleon Dynamite, the game. Here's a PSP and an extra copy that I bought.
All right, so you're acting like you're not going to do this at your next games party.
Well, yeah, you're right. I guess I don't even know what the multiplayer mini games would be.
Yeah.
Also a weird choice to have, like I get it, dancing is a big part of the movie, but like it's never that fun when your portable game requires you to have the volume up. Like a rhythm game is you can't really play it on the bus.
Yeah, we did play this on an emulator, you know, and like put it up on like the big screen, you know, so it worked a little better in that regard. But like, yeah, I always found the original PSP to be kind of unpleasant to play, like just the button faces. It's all very cramped up, and like I would always kind of hurt my fingers.
That's why
so this
Steve
was-
just showed us his PSP and then
Yes.
directed us to the laptop with
I'm like,
an
yeah,
Xbox
see?
controller.
I would be
It's great.
amazed if anybody showed me a PSP this year that was in good condition. Like I
It
own
is
a
fine.
It's in
PSP.
great shape.
No,
really?
no, the battery is all swollen and fell out of the back.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. No, I feel like the battery is bursting. Like my PSP has just scratches. Like I don't scratch any of my other screens, but my PSP screen is just decimated.
Oh yeah,
But,
yeah.
Sony knew what they were doing.
Oh yeah.
Well, they knew what they were doing when they made the Vita, even though that didn't sell at all. I played it on a Vita,
I like
and
the
it
Vita.
had a heck of a like having to tap on those buttons. The Vita button's very small.
They are.
Yeah,
Did you
I
have to
mean,
use the touch screen on the back and all, or
no.
that would be annoying.
Well,
So Jabin, what connected with you with this game? Like you were one of the vocal defenders here.
I feel like it had the whimsy of the movie. Like, I understand what you're saying about skills, but I think it definitely had the whimsy. Like, it definitely actually, you can tell that they watched the movie, which compared to some of the games that we play, you can tell, like, that's not a guarantee that the programmers and developers watched the movie. I feel like it was delightful. I feel like it brought the charm that some of the movie had to the game. And I thought they were really creative in using very small things from the movies to create games. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, we talked about how this movie is just a string of one-liners. So like this is a pretty direct way to adapt it. Like not only is this a game like made up of small moments the same way the movie is, we're actually literally adapting those jokes into a game, you know? So like it is about as, when you think about it, it's about as one-to-one an adaptation as you can make in its own weird way. So like, yeah, I can applaud them for finding a way to gamify this in a way that does actually make a certain amount of sense, even if it's not entirely successful. You know, I always hate those rhythm dancing mini games on a PSP, especially. Like, I think I tried to play Parappa the Rapper on a PSP at some point, and there's just those triggers just don't respond.
Also, the button icons don't make any sense because
No.
like the right trigger, like or the right directional button points to the left, and so
Yeah.
as it floats by, you're like, I don't know what direction that is.
Yeah. That was always annoying, but yeah, kind of a weird little surprise here. Like not a like you really can't argue for this being a top tier game, but like the more we're talking about it and the more we're kind of dissecting the analysis of it, it's like it's kind of successful in what it's trying to do.
I think that we encountered this quite a bit when we played Wii U games or N64 games, where I would be very sort of generous to like mini game collections or games that are fun to play for like an hour.
Yeah,
because we had some great times playing those games. But like if I had bought this at the store in 2007 for my PSP for like $40, I would have been pretty TO'd.
Oh yeah.
Because it's just there's really not much game here, and like it's all quite slapdash, and like there's not even that much. There's not really like clips from the movie aside from the still images of like the papercraft version of these characters, and there's no aspect of like there's no new Napoleon Dynamite content here. Like you're not seeing any sort of new lines or new stories or character interactions. Like the only thing that happens is Tina the llama gets lost and you have to find her, which is just some thread to tie the mini games together. All of it is basically retreads from the movie.
Yeah.
But like, again, like playing it in this setting, feeling nostalgic for Napoleon Dynamite and like just having 2 hours available to play through some of these mini games, like I had fun.
And if you're sticking with Justin's theory that this is all just in Napoleon's head, it actually makes a lot more sense too. Like that he's living out his little.
Well, some of them definitely are. There's another mini game where you fly around on a Pegasus and like shoot things out of the sky with flaming arrows. So
is there a Liger though?
Oh, there's definitely a Liger. I think there's a whole Liger mini game, if I remember. They all blend together in my head because
there's a lot.
When you play them all in quick succession, you realize 30 mini games is a lot.
Yeah, it's really a lot. Yeah, that's going to keep you busy. Yeah, that's like a third of a Mario Party or something like that. That may even be like a whole like early Mario Party.
Ooh, I got to say though, on some of the later levels, there was like most of the earlier mini games take place over 3 rounds, and some of the later ones they would have a 4th round. And I would audibly groan every time that round 4 came up. I was like, "Oh, more of this!"
Oh, I was
always stresses me out.
3 came up.
Yeah, because 3 seems like such a natural place to stop. So when they throw in 4, I'm just like, "Are they going to 10? Like, do I have to play 10 of these?"
Yeah, because if any of these mini games went for more than like 3 minutes, I'm like, too long.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's move on then to our rankings of these properties. Now, we go on a scale of good movie, good game to bad movie, bad game, or some measure in between. I don't think we've ever once actually stuck to that specific scale. We're going to throw in our own words in here. So I'm going to say this is a gosh movie and a dang it game. Adapt that as you will.
That's a lower effort than I usually put in when I make a bullshit.
Your effort is usually like this was a movie and this was a game. God. Would you say that's accurate this time too, Justin?
Yeah, I wasn't fond of the movie, and I don't think it was bad, but it was a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think J-Ban hit the nail on the head on a lot of points. This is my second time seeing it in 20 years, and I'm probably good. Maybe I'll get a third view in the next 20 years. Maybe not, but if I don't, I won't be sad.
Well, you got to go once a decade. It sounds like you do 3 and 30 and like 4 and 40, and
I don't know about that one.
And that's how we will measure the passing of the hours of our lives.
This decade has been 4 Napoleon Dynamites long.
Oh no, that's a decade. I think the game was, again, it was okay. I lean towards bad game just because there's no real substance to it.
I think this is unquestionably a bad game if you don't like the movie, even though J-Ban might disagree, because to me the only the main joy I found was the goofy paper cutouts and stuff. But
The mini games absolutely felt like the type of shit that we would play online in the computer lab at school.
Oh,
like
it's
old
definitely a
Flash games.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
100% Flash game. Yeah. J-Ben, where do you land on that?
I think it's a flexible movie.
Flexible. Okay.
I mean, I think that's true. I think that this movie is just like, it's just what it is. And like you guys said earlier, sometimes you're in the pocket for it and like sometimes you're not. But like the movie does what it sets out to do. It's just, yeah,
It's Schrodinger's movie.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I had fun with the mini games, so I'm gonna say a fun game. Maybe it's only fun for a certain amount of time, but I did have fun.
Yeah. And Woody, how about you?
I say good movie, and if you're in the exact same boat as me and you like looked up this episode of the podcast, you're like, oh, I love that movie. Like, you could play this game for a couple hours and have an all right time. I would not go as far as to say it's a good game.
No, but not a disaster.
Yeah, I would say good movie, bad game, but like that's okay.
It's a very
I don't know. I guess I was just when you decided that you were going to do this podcast, I'm like, oh, you're going to have to play so much garbage because like my memory of like movie based games is so much like Back to the Future and the Terminator for NES that are just like absolutely horrendous. And like this game was not really on that level.
No.
Yeah, we've played much worse.
You want to know the one that like I think has, I don't know about y'all if you have a new like worst game, but the one that's kind of still been sticking with me as a terrible game is the Vertigo from like 2019.
Oh man.
Yeah, they did not They did like the world's loosest adaptation of Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, and it's like this weird point and click adventure thing with no momentum and no energy.
They tried to make like a Quantic Dream game out of it.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
No.
I mean, I will say like that's a pretty good idea. If I was gonna design a game based on Vertigo, that's the genre and vibe that makes sense.
It was wholly like it was licensed, but there was nothing taken from the movie other than like you're vaguely solving a crime.
Yeah, and he's like kind of agoraphobic. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, bad movie or bad game. Yeah, Vertigo's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, this is Steve's new hot take. Vertigo, boo.
Vertigo sucks eggs. Yeah, don't see it. Alfred Hitchcock, come for me, bro.
Yep.
Well, Woody, it's been delightful having you back. Thank you for taking the time and talking some dynamite with us.
No, that was fun. I think about this movie a lot, and I'm always curious to hear other people's takes because it's not like. I don't feel like it's an accepted movie that everyone likes, as proof by the four of us having fairly disparate opinions. So.
Yeah. We contain all these different disparate opinions within ourselves as well. Do you have anything else to plug? Anything to let people know about?
No, I don't.
Just being
just
a cool
Napoleon
dude,
Dynamite for the PSP or DS.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's fun on the DS. You get to touch a bunch of stuff.
That is
always fun to touch. That's what I'll plug. I'll plug touching things. I'm in favor of it.
Okay.
No more questions. Let's move on.
No more questions. Well, you can still find our old episodes of Ultra 64, Wii Universe. They're all out there. We podcasted a lot together, so those are evergreen. They're always out there. So check them out. And if you want to listen to more of this show here, Cinema Arcade, we've got another movie coming for you next week, one that I have not seen, and I'm excited to get to it because we're going to be talking about one of the most legendary box office failures of all time. Still to this day, one of the biggest money. Do you have a guess?
Are you going to play Cutthroat Island?
Yes, we are. It is going to be Cutthroat Island. You got it in one. We are talking
I played that game a lot for Super Nintendo. I don't think I ever got past the minecart level.
I haven't so far either. And to be clear, that's level 2.
Yeah. God.
So
minecarts, there was a lot of minecart games on the Super Nintendo, and like the minecarts was always the worst part.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, pretty much universally. And yet now there's going to be a new Donkey Kong Country themed roller coaster, a minecart roller coaster at the Nintendo Land. I keep getting that put in my algorithm. So
I mean, honestly, that sounds pretty awesome.
it looks pretty fun. Looks pretty fun. They found a way to make you safely do the jumps between rails. Too.
Oh yeah,
It's pretty
that's in there. You jump
Whoa.
out of the cart into the next cart.
No, they do. It's like it's like a double rails. I don't know. There's videos of it. It looks interesting.
Wow.
Though.
Pass
Either
off
way.
type of situation or
But yeah, we're talking about Cutthroat Island, a big old floppy flop of a movie that I'm still looking forward to watching because I like Rennie Harlan movies. They're agreeably dumb, and this one seems like it might be agreeably dumb. Now, J-Ben, you've seen this one before already.
Yes, I have.
Okay, all right. I'm excited. Again. Justin,
we're back
no?
to our normal trend of me knowing nothing about this movie.
Perfect. Well, we'll all be pleasantly surprised when we talk about Cutthroat Island next time. Thank you to everybody for being here, and we will see you next time. Gosh.
Bye.
That was more of a goofy gosh.
I know.
Gosh.
Whoosh.